There's a feeling today that something is ending quietly beneath the surface. Not dramatically, not through sudden external change, more like your inner world is reaching the end of a long emotional exhale. Because tomorrow, the Taurus New Moon arrives. And right before new cycles begin, there's often a final clearing phase first. A moment where your awareness becomes extremely honest about what can no longer move forward with you. That's the energy building now. You may notice today that certain emotional patterns feel unusually obvious. Certain habits feel heavier. Certain attachments feel more draining. Certain environments feel harder for your nervous system to tolerate. Not because life suddenly changed overnight, because clarity is sharpening. And once clarity sharpens, emotional excess becomes difficult to ignore. The Pluto retrograde process has already spent weeks exposing what destabilizes your peace, what keeps your nervous system in survival mode, what repeatedly drains emotional energy without creating long-term stability in return. And now, your inner world is preparing for reset. Not empty reset, intentional reset. The kind that clears emotional space before healthier patterns begin growing. You may also feel less emotionally interested in forcing things today. Less urgency, less emotional chasing, less desire to control every outcome immediately. That matters, because Taurus energy does not force growth, it grounds it. It builds slowly enough for roots to actually hold, and roots are what this current phase has been preparing. More stable emotional foundations, more sustainable priorities, more grounded awareness of what genuinely supports your future long term. You may even notice today that your body wants quietness now, more stillness, more simplicity, more emotional space to breathe. Listen to that, because your nervous system is recalibrating itself before the next cycle begins, and recalibration often feels quieter than people expect. Not emotionally empty, emotionally clear. So, today, pay attention to what your inner world is naturally trying to release, not through force, through honesty. Because tomorrow's new moon is not only about planting new seeds, it's about finally creating enough stable space for those seeds to grow differently than before. Right before a major reset, awareness often becomes sharper. Not louder, sharper. And that's exactly what may be happening now. You may notice today that your emotional reactions feel more revealing, not necessarily more intense, more honest. Certain situations immediately show you whether they support your peace or slowly drain it. Certain conversations instantly reveal whether they create grounding or emotional exhaustion. Certain habits suddenly feel obviously misaligned with the future you're trying to build. That's not random sensitivity. That's clarity increasing before renewal begins. Because the Taurus New Moon tomorrow is not arriving to create chaos, it's arriving to stabilize growth. And before stabilization happens, your awareness needs to recognize clearly what no longer belongs inside the foundation. That's why emotional residue may feel more visible now, not to overwhelm you, to prepare you. Pluto retrograde has been exposing deeper patterns for weeks: emotional dependency, mental survival habits, cycles rooted in overstimulation, fear, or emotional overextension. But now, the energy shifts toward integration. Your system is beginning to ask, what can actually continue with me long term? That question changes everything.
because long-term growth requires different emotional conditions than short-term survival. You may also notice today that emotional simplicity feels more attractive now. Not emotionally shutting down, simplifying. Less emotional clutter, less psychological noise, less need to constantly carry tension internally. Because your nervous system is becoming less willing to normalize emotional overload. And once that shift happens, your priorities naturally begin changing too. You stop emotionally feeding every distraction. You stop overextending energy into unstable situations. You stop treating emotional chaos like proof that something is meaningful. That awareness creates space, and space is exactly what this new moon energy needs, especially Taurus energy. Because Taurus grows slowly, steadily, patiently. It builds through consistency, not emotional urgency, not constant force. And that's why today may feel quieter emotionally. Your inner world is reorganizing itself around what can genuinely support stability moving forward. You may even realize today that certain emotional attachments have already started weakening naturally. Not because you stopped caring completely, because your awareness is beginning to outgrow the survival patterns attached to them. That realization can feel emotional, but freeing too. Because once clarity becomes honest, release no longer feels like punishment. It begins feeling like preparation. Preparation for healthier roots, healthier priorities, healthier emotional foundations, the kinds of foundations capable of supporting the next chapter differently.
One of the hardest parts of transformation is not the change itself. It's releasing emotional attachment to the version of life your nervous system became familiar with, even when that version was exhausting. Because familiarity creates emotional gravity. The mind clings to what it recognizes. The nervous system clings to what it predicts, even when those patterns no longer support growth. That's why this current phase can feel emotionally strange. Part of you is already preparing for a healthier chapter, while another part is still adjusting to the idea that emotional survival mode does not need to remain your normal forever. You may notice today that certain emotional habits feel weaker now. The urge to overanalyze constantly, the urge to emotionally chase certainty, the urge to keep carrying tension long after situations have already changed. That matters, because emotional healing does not only remove pain, it changes what your nervous system believes it must constantly prepare for. And once that belief begins changing, your internal world starts reorganizing itself differently. Less hypervigilance, less emotional overmanagement, less attachment to emotionally draining cycles that once felt unavoidable. That's a major shift, especially psychologically, because many people stay emotionally attached not only to relationships or situations, but to familiar emotional states, familiar stress, familiar urgency, familiar emotional chaos. And when healing begins reducing those patterns, part of the nervous system may initially feel uncertain, not because peace is wrong, but because peace is unfamiliar. That's why tomorrow's Taurus New Moon matters so much. It's not only about beginning something new, it's about teaching your system that growth can happen without emotional survival patterns controlling it constantly. Growth can happen slowly, safely, steadily, without emotional chaos being required first. You may also notice today that your body is becoming more sensitive to what disrupts your regulation. Noise, emotional unpredictability, overcomplicated dynamics, environments where your nervous system never fully relaxes. That awareness is not weakness, it's recalibration. Your system is becoming more honest about what it can sustainably carry long term, and honesty creates healthier decisions. You may even realize today that some emotional cycles continued mainly because they felt familiar, not because they felt healthy. That realization can be uncomfortable, but it's powerful too. Because once awareness separates familiarity from alignment, real change becomes possible. Not forced change, conscious change. The kind that grows from clarity instead of emotional desperation. So, if today feels emotionally reflective, quieter, more aware of what no longer fits the future you want to build, it's because your inner world is already beginning to loosen its attachment to survival patterns that tomorrow's new moon is preparing you to finally move beyond.
This phase becomes delicate because once emotional clarity increases, part of you may want to immediately escape everything that feels heavy. The first trap is forcing emotional detachment too quickly, trying to cut off every uncomfortable feeling, trying to remove every difficult situation immediately, trying to emotionally reset overnight without allowing integration to happen naturally. Because when clarity arrives, urgency often follows. But Taurus energy does not rush healing, it grounds it. And grounded healing requires patience, not emotional extremes. The second trap is mistaking temporary relief for long-term alignment. Something feels lighter emotionally, so the mind immediately assumes this must be the right direction. But relief alone does not always equal stability. Sometimes real healing still requires difficult honesty, still requires uncomfortable conversations, still requires consistent effort, still requires sitting with emotions instead of immediately escaping them. That distinction matters deeply right now. You may also notice today that your awareness is becoming more discerning about the difference between peace and avoidance. Peace regulates the nervous system, avoidance suppresses reality temporarily, and the nervous system knows the difference even when the mind tries to escape it. So the real calibration today is conscious release, not emotional escape. Allowing yourself to move beyond what no longer aligns without trying to emotionally bypass the deeper integration process entirely. Because what makes this phase powerful is not how quickly you reinvent yourself emotionally, it's how honestly you begin building stability beneath the next version of yourself now.
So, how do you move into tomorrow's Taurus New Moon without emotionally forcing transformation and without carrying old survival patterns into the next cycle? You focus on grounding first, not performance, because this new moon is not asking you to become someone completely different overnight. It's asking you to build differently, more consciously, more sustainably, more honestly. Start by paying attention to what your nervous system genuinely trusts now, not temporary emotional excitement. Trust. What environments create regulation? What relationships support emotional stability? What routines help your body feel safer consistently? Those things matter deeply now, because Taurus energy builds through repetition, not emotional urgency. And whatever receives consistent energy during this next cycle begins strengthening roots beneath the surface. You may also find it helpful to release pressure around immediate results.
Not everything meaningful reveals visible growth instantly, especially under Taurus energy. Some of the strongest transformations develop slowly, quietly, strengthening internally first before external results fully appear. That's why patience matters now, not passive waiting, grounded pacing. You can also begin asking yourself a different question now. Not, how do I emotionally escape the past, but what kind of emotional foundation can actually support the future I want to grow into? That question changes everything, because the future is always shaped by the conditions underneath it, emotionally, mentally, physically, and healthy conditions create healthier outcomes over time. You may also notice today that your body needs gentleness now, more sleep, more grounding, more quietness, more emotional simplicity. Listen to that, because your nervous system has been processing deeply for weeks, and tomorrow's new moon will strengthen most effectively where regulation already exists. Not perfection, regulation. You may even realize today that emotional peace is becoming non-negotiable now, not because life must always feel easy, because your awareness finally understands how much emotional chaos costs your future long-term. That awareness changes standards naturally. You stop building futures on emotionally unstable foundations. You stop investing energy where your nervous system continuously loses stability. And once those standards strengthen, your next chapter begins changing too, quietly but powerfully. So today, enter this final clearing phase slowly, without emotional pressure, without forcing certainty, without demanding instant transformation. Because tomorrow's new moon is not about becoming perfect, it's about planting healthier roots than the ones you've relied on before.
Before the new moon arrives tomorrow, pause here for a moment. Because your inner world has already been changing quietly long before external life fully reflects it. And part of this phase is allowing your nervous system to actually recognize that change. You may notice today that certain emotional patterns no longer feel as automatic as before. Certain reactions slow down. Certain fears lose intensity. Certain emotional cycles feel less convincing than they once did. That matters deeply, because awareness has been creating space within you. Space between emotion and reaction. Space between fear and belief. Space between old survival patterns and the choices you make now. And that space is where healing begins stabilizing. Not through force, through repetition. The Taurus New Moon approaching tomorrow supports exactly that process. Not dramatic emotional reinvention, steady emotional reconstruction, the kind built through consistency, healthier routines, healthier boundaries, healthier relationships with your own nervous system. That's why this phase may feel quieter than expected. Real grounding often feels less emotionally dramatic than survival mode. But quieter does not mean weaker. In many ways, quiet stability requires more strength than constant emotional urgency ever did. Because stability asks your nervous system to trust something unfamiliar: peace. And peace can initially feel strange when the body spent years adapting to emotional unpredictability instead. You may also notice today that your emotional energy feels more intentional now, more careful about where it goes, more aware of what repeatedly drains it, more selective about what deserves access to your inner world moving forward. That's not emotional coldness,
That's emotional maturity becoming embodied. Your awareness is no longer existing only mentally. Your nervous system is beginning to believe it too. And once the nervous system begins trusting safety, your future choices naturally change afterward. Calmer decisions, more sustainable priorities, healthier emotional pacing. The kinds of changes that slowly reshape an entire life. You may even realize today that slower growth no longer feels like failure now. It feels safer, more sustainable, more real. That's the Taurus energy already working through you, preparing your system to grow differently this time, not through emotional survival, through grounded stability. So today, allow your nervous system to soften slightly. Allow emotional quietness to feel supportive instead of suspicious. Allow slower rhythms to become trustworthy again. Because what tomorrow's new moon begins planting will grow strongest where your inner foundation finally feels stable enough to support it long term.
Let everything settle here. Not to stop the transformation, but to recognize how much your inner world has already been preparing for this new chapter quietly. Because today was not about dramatic endings, it was about clearing space, intentional space, the kind that allows healthier growth to finally take root differently. So, take a breath, slow, grounded, unforced, and notice what feels different now. Maybe it's the reduced emotional urgency. Maybe it's the realization that your nervous system can no longer tolerate constant emotional overstimulation the same way. Maybe it's simply the awareness that peace now feels more valuable than emotional chaos ever did. That matters deeply. Because healing changes what your system is willing to normalize. You stop emotionally surviving everything. You stop carrying emotional weight that was never sustainable long term. You stop building your future on unstable emotional foundations. And once those patterns begin shifting, your next chapter changes too, quietly but permanently. That's why tomorrow's Taurus New Moon matters. Not because it instantly transforms your entire life overnight, because it begins a new cycle rooted in different emotional conditions. More grounding, more stability, more regulation, more awareness of what genuinely supports your peace long term. And seeds planted from that awareness grow differently. Slower, perhaps, but stronger, more sustainable, more capable of lasting. You may also realize today that healing often appears quietly first. A calmer nervous system, a clearer emotional boundary, a slower reaction, a healthier relationship with peace itself. Those quieter shifts reshape your future more deeply than emotional extremes often do. Because consistency compounds, emotionally, mentally, physically. And consistency is exactly what this next cycle is preparing to strengthen within you now. You may even feel that part of you is finally ready to stop building life around emotional survival patterns. Not emotionally numb, ready for stability, ready for sustainability, ready for growth that no longer requires chaos to feel emotionally meaningful first. That readiness is important because tomorrow's new moon does not ask you to become perfect before moving forward. It asks you to plant differently, from clearer awareness, from healthier emotional soil, from a more grounded relationship with yourself and your future. So as you move forward from here, stay close to what feels grounding, not emotionally addictive, not emotionally chaotic,
grounding? What consistently protects your peace? What strengthens your nervous system? What feels stable enough to continue building your future upon? Let those answers guide you into this next cycle now, without rushing, without forcing certainty, without emotionally dragging old survival patterns into the future with you unnecessarily. Because what's beginning tomorrow is not only a new moon, it's a new emotional foundation quietly preparing to grow beneath your life now. And if this helped you understand your current phase, even slightly, return to it. Not to emotionally hold on to the past, but to continue building forward from a steadier place within yourself.